Good afternoon and welcome to the end of what I hope has been a very productive IACP 2017. I'm not speaking hyperbolically when I say we are thrilled to have so many of you here. We know that home and dinner in whatever order beckons. We're also aware that we're supposed to dazzle you at this point, but our request for pyrotechnics and door prizes were turned down rather soundly, but we'll do our best. My name is Sarah Estill. I'm a social science analyst with the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services at the U.S. Department of Justice, and I am the very proud project manager for engaging college students in 21st century law enforcement with Howard University. The award was awarded competitively to the Ronald W. Walters Center in 2015. And the point of this project is to address a concern that every one of you has brought up in every meeting we've had with cops. Law enforcement as a profession is facing a hiring and retention deficit. Since its inception, engaging college students in 21st century law enforcement has focused on identifying obstacles to entry for college-educated minority candidates. One of the great joys of research, however, is that sometimes your findings are both richer and broader than you initially expected, and that has been the case with this project. As we proceeded from focus groups to workshops and convenings with practitioners, students, and subject matter experts, we found that we were gleaning information about obstacles to entering a law enforcement career for millennials more broadly and for minorities specifically. During this presentation, we're going to review the findings thus far from the project. We're going to hear from Chiefs Durham and Hawkins about their experiences in recruitment and retention, and we'll open the floor to questions from the audience at the end, so please hold on to your questions. And please do ask questions. There are mics in the far aisles. In creating a space for respectful dialogue about powerful and difficult subjects, we found that the suggestions provided by our college-educated minority millennial participants were nuanced, specific, and thoughtful, which we expected, but they also came from lines of inquiry that we had never initially thought to encompass with the project. So we're eager to pass our findings to the field because we believe it's deeply relevant to the future of law enforcement as it moves into the 21st century. The project has one final event to complete before we start working on the findings report. We hope to have it available in 2018. Everything will be available at the COPS office website. There are blue flyers on the back table. All of the resources that we produce are available for download or for shipping. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists. Dr. Elsie Scott serves as the founding director of the Ronald W. Walters Leadership and Public Policy Center at Howard University in the District of Columbia. She has previously served as the president and chief executive of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, vice president for research programs at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, executive director of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, Deputy Commissioner of Training for the New York City Police Department. She's held senior and supervisory roles in police departments at the City of Detroit, the District of Columbia, and at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. She's taught political sciences, urban studies, criminal justice at numerous institutions of higher education, including Howard University, Rutgers University, the University of Central Florida, and North Carolina Central University. She holds degrees in political science from Southern University Baton Rouge, the University of Iowa, and Atlanta University. To her right is Naya Young, who is a graduate student in the political science program at Howard University in the District of Columbia. She's a candidate for her master's degree in international relations and public policy. Her research interests include voting rights protection and grassroots community activism. She's a graduate assistant for the Engaging College Students in 21st Century Law Enforcement project with Dr. Scott. And I will take a moment to say that we couldn't have accomplished anywhere near what this project has been able to accomplish without Naya and her peers at Howard. So we are tremendously grateful that she was able to take time during the school week to come and speak with us. Ms. Young is proud to have been part of such a meaningful research project so early on in her academic career. To her right is Chief Gina V. Hawkins. Chief Hawkins is the Chief of Police for the City of Fayetteville in North Carolina. She is both the first minority and first female Chief of Police for the department. Chief Hawkins started her career in 1988 with the City of Atlanta Police Department, and she has served since in the city of Sandy Springs, Georgia as a commander, and Clayton County Police Department as the Deputy Chief of Police. Chief Hawkins is a member of the International Association of Chiefs of Police, the Georgia Association of Chiefs of Police, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, the National Association of Women Law Enforcement Executives, and the Hispanic American Police Command Officers Association. Chief Hawkins is a graduate of the FBI National Associates Academy, and she was a selected delegate to the Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange, where she presently serves on the advisory board. She has attended North Carolina Central University. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice from Georgia State University and a Master's of Science in Management degree from Johns Hopkins University. Finally, and last but not least, we have Chief Alfred Durham, Chief of Police from the Richmond Police Department in Virginia. After serving 4 years of active duty with the U.S. Marine Corps, he began his law enforcement career with the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department, where he served his first tour of duty from 1987 to 2005. During that time, he served as the boating law administrator for the District of Columbia, and he spearheaded the planning and execution of the security operations for the 55th presidential inauguration in January of 2005. In 2005, he became the Chief of Staff with the Richmond, Virginia Police Department. In 2007, he returned to the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington as the Assistant Chief of Police. And in 2014, Chief Durham returned to the Richmond Police Department as the Deputy Chief of Administrative Services. In 2015, Mayor Dwight C. Jones appointed him to serve as the Chief of Police. Chief Durham has served a total of 17 years in active and reserve status in the U.S. Marine Corps. He attended the University of the District of Columbia, where he earned an associate's degree in Applied Sciences Corrections Administration. He is a certified public manager through the George Washington University, and he's completed the FBI's National Academy and the Penn State University Police Executive Development Program. He's also been certified through the Criminal Justice Academy of Central Virginia and the FBI National Executive Institute. I'm going to turn the mic over to Dr. Scott and Ms. Young, who will recap the findings from the Howard University project.
Thank you, Sarah. Can everybody hear me? I think I'm just going to sit, that way I can see the slides and make sure that they're coming up right. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through background material. Sarah gave you a background of how this project came about, that we are a cooperative agreement with the COPS office, and we've been working on this project since 2015. And the project is focusing on engaging college students in 21st century law enforcement. And we started this off looking at how we can strengthen community policing by getting young people more engaged in law enforcement, both in terms of looking at recruitment issues as well as trust issues, getting them to work with their police departments. And we wanted to create a dialogue around race relations between police departments and especially young African American students. And so what we have done, we attempted to do that through first convening focus groups, and we'll talk about the findings of the focus groups, and secondly through convening two what we call police student dialogue sessions, and we'll report on the findings of that. And I'd like to mention that Chief Durham did participate in both of those convenings that we held at Howard University. It was Howard University students, and we also had some University of District of Columbia students participating. And we had a number of police officials from around the country that came to Howard and spent a day dialoguing with our students about recruitment, hiring, and trust issues. Okay, what I'm going to do now is have Naya give a little background about why she was interested in working on this project and a little bit of background about the focus groups and what did they contain.
Hello, everybody can hear me? Okay. So I was interested in this project. Actually in my family, just a year before we started this project in 2014, in April 2014, my grandfather was actually a victim of, I guess police misconduct. And so, this was right before, I left Florida to come to Howard. And so this project kind of came to me, and I had to say to myself, okay, there must be a reason that this is, this opportunity has been presented to me, rather than me being, angry and being mad and upset. What is something that I can do to help to contribute, to this conversation? What is something that I can do to make sure that, incidents such that happened with my grandfather don't happen to anyone else. And so when, Dr. Scott said, I need some students, for this project, I was like, okay, I want to do this. Let's channel, my energy somewhere else to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So we started, we did 4 focus groups, and we wanted to pick schools where there was high, population of African American minority students, and based on their geographic region. So we chose Howard, of course, in DC, Dillard in New Orleans, Chicago State University, and Merritt in Oakland. And what we saw from, just the focus groups from the students, one, the students were so eager to, kind of jump right into the conversation, which is something that was, very amazing to me, because you would think that they would, not really want to speak, or they would have some reservations. But no, they were ready, willing. Of course, we wanted to warm up because they were like, who are these people? Why are they asking us these questions? But once we told them, we really just kind of want to get to know what you think, what's going on in your head. And they were very open with us. So majority of our students, were African American and Black. More than half of the students that we had during our focus groups were female. And most of them were juniors in college, and between the ages of 18 and 20 years old. And their majors, most of them, actually, you would think that they were, students that were in criminal justice or political science, but we had a wide variety of students ranging from, business to medicine. We had psychology, criminal justice, and political science. So all these students came together, and all of them had, very interesting perspectives. And what we found is that at the end, we were actually able to walk away from these focus groups with answers and, ways, okay, how can we build on that? And that was, very rewarding for me. So I'm going to pass it back to Dr. Scott. She's going to continue.
Okay, what were some of the themes that came out of the focus groups? And we have listed up here on the slides. One, we focused on what are your personal experiences with law enforcement? Have they been positive? Have they been negative? What would cause you to consider or not consider a career in policing? What kind of recruitment methods would you like to see the recruiters use in order to increase the number of African Americans interested in becoming police officers or law enforcement officials? And then how do we build trust between African American communities and the police? So in terms of personal experiences, more than half of the people in our focus groups had had a negative encounter with the police. But on the positive side, only 4 participants said they had never had a positive experience with the police. So whereas we had a large number that had had a negative, but it was somewhat balanced out by more than all of them except for 4 haven't had some kind of positive experience with the police. And this was interesting to me because I had my first positive experience with the police after I had gone to graduate school, except for the police officer that was a member of my daddy's church. And he had on his car, I lived in Louisiana, his car said colored police, so he could only arrest black people. So this is not unusual for large numbers of African Americans to have had negative encounters with the police by the time they go to college. But also, we recognize that more of the men in the group had had a negative encounter than the women. But having a family member or a family friend involved in law enforcement really helped to shape more positive experience or more positive perceptions of the police. We asked questions about their career considerations. 51% said that they would consider law enforcement as a career. You all are probably surprised at that from some of the discussions I've heard around the conference, is that many people feel like it's just a hopeless cause to spend time talking with black college students because they wouldn't even consider this. But they said they would consider it, so we need to dig down further to see what we need to do. 26%, about about 1/4 of them stated they had no interest in being a police officer, but the other 23% were not sure. Then we asked them what would or would not affect whether they would consider a career in law enforcement. The ones who said that yes, they would consider a career in law enforcement, many of them were interested in bringing about change in their community and being of service. Some of them talked about that if I become a police officer, I can affect more change by being on the inside than on the outside. And a few talked about job security, and many people think that the millennials don't care about job security. There are still a few out there. And then some say the excitement of the job would interest them rather than have to go take a job sitting behind a desk someplace. The ones who said they would not consider it, some of them talked about the social status of police officers, and they even talked about their parents feeling like, you know, we sent you to college and now you want to be a police officer. Many of them talked about having better career alternatives. Some of them said it was a dangerous job, and then others talked about having had negative experiences with the police. Okay, we asked them questions about what can police departments do to improve their recruitment abilities. One of the things they talked about is engaging the community in the recruitment process. Now, when we asked them about whether there need to be a different recruitment strategies in order to recruit blacks. Some of them talked about, oh, no, but then as we got into the discussion, they started talking about some of the flyers as we look at some of the flyers. And this flyer wouldn't attract me because I don't see any people who look like me. So they weren't quite sure about, when we asked the question about whether the campaign needed to be minority focused or black focused in order to attract more African Americans. And we had some discussion in the focus groups about some of the students felt like police departments are not doing enough to weed out the bad guys amongst their ranks, and they don't want to serve along with those people. And some talked about that police departments really need to look at recruiting more college-educated and socially aware people. We asked them about how do police departments build more trust, especially in the black community. And we got into a lot of discussion about the media and how the negative portrayal of police in the media. And so they felt like they need to see more positive images and positive portrayals of the police. They talked about hiring. They felt like there need to be more of a focus on hiring honest and respectful recruits, need greater accountability in law enforcement, and they felt like police officers need to know more about the communities in which they serve, since many of them do not grow up in the communities where they serve. And greater sensitivity among police officers. Now, as I mentioned, we did two what we call police student convenings, one in October 2016 and the other one in April 2017. And these are some of the findings. And as I mentioned, Chief Durham attended both, so when he talks, if there are any things that I forgot, left out, he can bring that up. We had some very frank discussion. In fact, the head of the cops office at that time said no place in the country had he ever gone that he had such brutally honest people, because some of the students, especially some of the male students, really were very honest about the negative experiences they had with the police and how this had tainted their whole opinion, and how I think they were kind of surprised to come there and sit around the table all day with police officers and see that it's a little different from any of the experiences that they had had. They talked about needing more African-American chiefs, and African-American chiefs who become chiefs, the African-Americans who become chiefs, they felt like they need to see themselves as change agents and come into departments to bring about some of the change, to change some of the negativity and some of the negative culture that they saw within the police department. And we had a lot of discussion about recruitment disqualifiers. They talked about marijuana and how in places like Washington, D.C., where it's legal to smoke marijuana, but if they go to apply for a police position in another state, how they may be naturally disqualified. They talked about credit, how many of them have gotten big student loans, and some of them may not be able to pay those student loans on time, and that could become a disqualifier. So they felt like police departments need to look at more situations on an individual basis than just having a bunch of automatic disqualifiers. Okay, then one thing that came out in all of the cities as well as in the discussion here was that it does not take, a black police officer is not automatically good in the community. A white police officer is not automatically bad, that there are good and bad police officers from all racial and ethnic groups, and that we need to make an emphasis on recruiting good police officers. We asked them specifically about what they want to see from their law enforcement officials. And respect, respect, respect. That kept coming up, themes throughout all of the discussion. Transparency, accountability. Those were three major factors they talked about. And they also would like to see police officers become a part of the communities where they serve. Another thing I think a lot of the males talked about is they felt like police officers second guess and stereotype black males. And so therefore, their intentions are always questioned, whether they are college students or whatever. Okay, what were some of the recommendations that they gave? Am I doing on time? Recommendations they gave on recruitment. They suggested that you need to find a way in order to entice young people to become police officers. And we can talk a little bit more about that when we get into discussion. And ensuring diversity be at the forefront of the recruitment. And make law enforcement appealing to where they are. Because some of the advertisements they saw as being more on adventure, whatever, but many of them were interested in service. And so can the advertisement play up that part that they'll be able to serve their communities by becoming a police officer? The other thing they talked about, and I think this is true also, especially in the Hispanic communities, is that the parents often influence whether young people become police officers. And they felt like that police departments need to do more spending time, like when the football team is trying to recruit a young man to come to college and play football. They spend a lot of time with the parents convincing that this is the best thing. And they felt like police departments need to do that. And when I thought back on when I was with the New York Police Department, how many people told me they really had not planned to be a police officer, but their mama decided that they needed a civil service job. So their mother marched them down there to take that civil service test. But now some of them are telling me that their parents are telling them negative things about the police. So the ones who are interested, sometimes their parents are saying, oh no, you don't want to be affiliated with that. So you need to spend time with the parents also. Okay, the second convening, as I mentioned, was held in April. And we tried to bring back as many of the students as possible that had been part of the first group. And we had one young man from California, from LA, I think, in the first group that had really unloaded in the first session about the police and his negative experiences. So I put him on the program during the second to talk about what had happened during the period from October to April. And he had a lot of positive things to say. This had been a great experience for him, as I even saw some of the police officials going and spending time with him on the break. And I think that was very important because he had never met a police official who wanted to talk to him man to man, and that had an influence on him. And so they felt like they need more sessions like what we had that police officers need to come into the classrooms and spend some time talking with them. And we have a course at Howard University. Some of you might have heard of the course, Policing Inside Out, that Dr. Muhammad, because it's a joint program with the IACP, they felt like that program is very important. She was a part of the convening, Dr. Muhammad was. The other thing, they felt like they spent a lot of time talking to black police officials, and they felt like a lot of black officials may get it, but they wanted to be talking to more white officials about what their needs and concerns were. Several people mentioned about how if the police officials feel like they're having a hard time with the college students, that think about all those people who don't go to college and the negative influence that they have and the negative impressions they have of the police. So we need to find a way first to start maybe with the college students because they may be easier to reach, but also how do we reach young black, especially black men who are not going to college, who could possibly add something to their communities by becoming police officers. And they talked about using recruitment methods that include social media and technology, and there was a presentation here yesterday that gave some good examples of that. I think it was from the LA Sheriff's Department. And training police officers how to communicate with African-American millennials. You know, I continually struggle at myself as a college professor, learning how to communicate with them because they talk a different language. You know, you put an emoji out there, you think you're being cool, and that emoji means something totally different. So we need to find a way to get through to them. Okay, what are some of the barriers to recruiting black officers? We talked about negative perceptions of the police, which everybody knows. We spent some time talking about media coverage of police shootings, that they felt like, you know, they see so much of that until it becomes in their mindset, this is what the police are about because there are all these shootings. So they listen to the music, and a lot of the rap artists have negative messages about the police in their music. That's social media. They go on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, and they get negative messages or get a lot of messages about police misconduct. So they feel like all of this is in the head of young black, especially black men. And so how do we get beyond that to try to entice them that they can be the change that they want to see? And they felt like some of the recruitment methods that some police departments use just don't resonate with black young people. They're nothing that would interest them in those flyers and in those recruitment films. And they don't get enough positive stories about the police. And then they also talked about wanting to have more police officers who look like them on the recruitment teams. And some of them also talked about they need to see more blacks in management positions, that this would interest college students because they want to see if they become a police officer, that there's an opportunity maybe for them to become a captain or some other executive, or at least, and also the chief of police. Okay, recruitment tips. Flyers that show diversity, I mentioned that. Incentives for police officers to participate in recruitment. Oh, this is what they were saying, that police officers who are not part of the recruitment team, but if departments can have some kind of incentive to make some of the good officers want to go out and start recruiting, helping to recruit minority officers, that would be helpful. And then recruiting from black communities. And this last one, humanizing the police. Is that this course that we teach at Howard, Policing Inside Out, the police officers have to come in their uniform. That's a requirement. Because what they want, what Dr. Muhammad want them to do is to see beyond the uniform that these are people. And I remember we did a course like that in New York Police Department, and officers were so used to being able to come in civilian clothes. We said, no, you have to come in your uniform, and we want people to feel comfortable in looking at you in the uniform. Okay, building trust. How do you build, they talked about how do you build relationships when there's not a crisis? because they felt like often that people don't want to talk to them except when there has been a crisis. Now, I've already mentioned about changing the culture, having genuine relationships and using social media. We also talked about using town hall meetings to hear from the community when there is not a crisis, and educating officers on the communities they serve. We had broken into some small groups, and one of the small groups was about race and gender. So I'll talk a little bit about that before I wrap up. They felt like police departments often don't recognize that there are specific needs and interests of women and specific needs and interests of blacks and Hispanics in the department. So there need to be some frank discussion about that. That a lot of the students felt like women are more empathetic, and there should be more of a focus on recruiting more women into law enforcement. And that there should be more creativity in the places where you recruit, that don't just go to the standard places that you usually recruit. Try to be creative with that. And then they felt that as a black police officer, that they would have a special role in improving their communities. Okay, I already mentioned about honest discussions around race. So implicit bias was another discussion that we talked about. They felt like they had talked with some of them had talked with police officers, women and minorities, that when they try to do the right thing in terms of working with the black community, they felt like they got harassed and they had discrimination complaints filed against them. And so they felt like that would make them somewhat uncomfortable about becoming a police officer. And they felt like that black police officers could help with retention of other blacks because they can serve as mentors for the new officers coming in. On retention, they felt like they weren't really ready to talk about retention because they felt like first we got to recruit people. We can't retain people we don't have. And another big issue is how are you going to retain millennials when they're not looking for a job that lasts longer than 5 years, really 2 years? And that women and minorities must feel comfortable within the agency. Okay, so I just want to wrap up with asking Naya, just having participated as a millennial, having participated in the focus groups and in the convening, and with the background of having her grandfather killed in a situation with the police. What are your observations, and what would you like? You got a room full of police officials here. What would you like to leave with them?
So I think I think my role here, not only as a millennial, I'm also a minority and I'm also a woman. So I have, I have a big role in this. And also, we get this, everybody has this idea that, us, millennials, that we don't really care about much, or if it's not, something that has a hashtag in front of it, it's not really important to us. And that's one of my observations from these focus groups is that's not true at all. In fact, a lot of us millennials are very, very interested in this conversation and think that it's important that we do have these conversations. Like I said before, I had to find a way to channel, my feelings, how I was feeling, because I could have easily, been someone that's like, I don't want to work on this, we don't need the police, we don't need this. But it's my job, my job is to show, millennials that have had similar experiences that there is a way that we can, that you can take that energy and put it into something else. And so one of the things that was was kind of like a common theme with our police convenings and our focus groups was this idea of community policing. You know, when we talk about community policing, if we think of, you know, my grandfather, if you know, live in this community that you're policing or that you frequent this area, then, you know, you would know, oh, that's, you know, that's Mr. Green. You know, he's been here for over 50 years. He's done the, you know, the football team every summer for the past 10 years. You know, he's a diabetic. Everybody knows him. You know, if you know the area that you're in, you know, oh, that's, you know, what's his name from down the street. He's just walking home from work. He doesn't have a car. There's no reason to follow him. He doesn't do anything. That's, you know, she just got back in school. She's fine. This is what we talk about when we talk about community policing, knowing their area, knowing the people that you know, that you are protecting. That is what we want. You know, we want, you know, to be respected. You know, you have to give respect to get respect. That's where it starts. It starts with us having a conversation about respecting one another, and then also realizing that at the end of the day, whether you're in a suit or whether you're in sweats or whether you're in joggers or whatever, at the end of the day, we're all still people, right? But we all have a job in this grand scheme of things. And at the end of the day, we have to respect each other. We have to realize that, you know, I'm a human, you're a human, and I'm going to protect you, you're going to protect me, and we're going to work at this together. And that's how we get the problem fixed. So this has definitely been an amazing experience for me, and I hope to continue this work so we can come back again and give you more findings. And I want to thank Dr. Scott and Sarah and both of our chiefs here for coming to our police convening, and thank all of you for listening and engaging with us. And I hope that you all have questions afterwards, because we would love to hear your questions.
I want to build on one thing that Dr. Scott said. A common theme that we heard talking to all millennials is look for those disqualifiers within your department. Every department is different. Visible tattoo policy. How many people in here have a no visible tattoo policy for recruitment? Is that an automatic? Raise your hands high. It's okay. We're all friends here and tired. Good. Okay. So even if you have a no visible tattoos policy, can you consider, for instance, allowing your uniform policy to be changed so you can wear sleeves? Anybody have a no facial hair policy for, yep, okay, so there's hands going up. Drug use, it may be worth discussing your drug use policy within your department, depending on where it is. And the credit check, all of these things are not factors to be ignored. What we're talking about is having the application thrown out prior to interview stage. Many of the young officers who participated and many of the students made it extremely clear that sometimes you need to be able to explain you got into an accident, you had to go to the hospital prior to ACA, maybe you didn't have insurance coverage, you put your medical bills on your credit cards, now your credit rating is in the toilet. And if that is an automatic disqualifier, then you've not had an opportunity to explain that your credit history doesn't have to be a liability for your hiring agency. So look at the things carefully that cause candidates to be checked out before you've even had a chance to sit down and talk to them. That was another universal thing that I was floored to hear with great precision in our sessions. At the risk of academics telling police officers how to do their jobs, we'd now like to bring two chiefs to the microphone to talk about their experiences with recruitment and retention, because researchers can talk all day about what we should do, but we want to hear about what we can do, what we have done, and what we would like to do.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I tell you, I think opportunity is a key word that we all can appreciate. Opportunity, when Dr. Scott called me and asked me to be part of this, I thought it was important. As you all know, when you look at what happened in August 9th, 2014, it changed the dynamics of policing, and that was Ferguson. And then after Ferguson, it was like this snowball effect. And my experience, as Dr. Scott said, it was a frank conversation. I tell you, that's an understatement. One of the things I think that we in law enforcement know, we don't listen well. We think we know everything, and don't take this the wrong way, this is my experience, that we think we know everything, and sometimes we don't listen. And having a conversation with, the term I used is privilege. That was a big word that came up. Those students at Howard University, many African Americans, they consider themselves privileged because they have an opportunity to be at a historic black college or university. But in listening to the stories, I got mad. I got mad because everything those young folks were saying was not anything that I had did to them, not anything that my officers, because none of them was from Richmond, Virginia, but they looked at every police official initially that was in that room. We had chiefs, lieutenants, all across the board, represented from all across the country in that room, that conference room, all day. And I was upset because I'm like, wow, it's sort of like me being a military man, right? We all know what friendly fire is. So something that happened in Ferguson, something that happened in Cleveland, Ohio, we all feel that. At some point in our jurisdictions, we feel that. But just not only listening, but hearing what the young folks were saying, it opened my eyes. And I'll talk about some of the recruitment things that I took back. It's not only coming to, like saying, listening to them, but hearing them, and how can it benefit me to better my relationships or my department's relationships, my troops' relationships with the people that we serve in our community. When we talk about recruitment and retention, I think all of us, but let me say this. Again, I want to stick where, well, I can say that. In hearing a lot of the conversations, we're all having our challenges, especially with millennials, those who are really interested in becoming law enforcement police officers. In my jurisdiction, again, I'm from Richmond, Virginia, I have 4 competing jurisdictions, and they're all within 5 miles. When you look at the borders, 5 miles. And when you look at the challenges, I do pretty good on the recruitment part, but it's the retention part, because once we train them, as the city police department, the counties are taking them. And the thing that I've been fighting with my administration, and just like I'm pretty sure you do, is, and my legislators, is we're the lowest paid. Most cities are the lowest paid, and the surrounding jurisdictions, the counties, make all the money. So we train them. About a year later, they're gone. So, and even to lead to university police are taking my officers. So that, and not knocking the university police part, VCU, but when I see that, I'm like, we have a problem, and I'm trying to explain that we need to bring our pay up because the universities officers make starting pay is higher than what we have there. One of the things I took away when they were talking about, back in the day where parents would take their kids, young adults, to sign up for police department, one of the things I heard was the recruiting piece. And anybody from South Carolina here? So you think about it, right? We all, us folks who follow sports, there's a recruitment done before they graduate, right, from school. There's a young man, Zion Williamson. He's from South Carolina. They started recruiting this kid in the 10th grade. He has offers from like 40 schools across the country. So that's one of the things that we started doing in the Richmond Police Department. Think about it, and I'm pretty sure just like us, we touch kids almost every day, be it our school resource officers, our young adult police commissioners program, our PAL program. Those were the folks we're most influencing of our young people. So one of the things that I partner with the Richmond Public Schools, and think about this, a lot of programs that are out there, we are so disconnected. I was the chief for 2.5 years before I knew they had a public safety program in high school, right? There were 47 kids, young adults, in this program. So we partnered with Richmond Public Schools, but one of the things I'm putting in my budget now, just like the folks who are recruiting these young college athletes, that once they graduate from high school every year, and it's going in my budget, we're in the process now, and I think I have a thumbs up, but I'm going to hire 5 high school seniors straight out of high school, and make them civilian employees in the department, right? So think about it. We're accomplishing a few things here. One, I'm going to have future police officers if they hang around, but now I'm giving hope to the poverty level in the city of Richmond is about 26%. We are struggling with crime, lack of opportunities. Everybody's not going to college. Let's keep it real. And we have to keep that in mind. What are we doing those folks who don't have those support systems? So make a long story short, again, giving them a job, giving them opportunity, and when other people, we're hoping it's going to have that impact where other people say, wow, they did it, maybe we can too. And then not only that, you're creating your own homegrown talent. So that's one of the opportunities. When you look at, for me, again, and we think about, a lot of people don't understand the processes that we go through as police department, law enforcement agencies, in our recruiting efforts. Just look at this. In last year, 1,927 applications we received. So we know that people put in their applications. Then we send them that letter, that notification, come take the test, right? So out of that 1,900, only 932 showed up to take the test, right? So when those 932 show up, what do? We got a physical fitness test, right? We weed them out, right? Then, as they were saying, you sit down now, you pass the fitness, you go and take the written exam. Then we weed out another third probably. And then, as Dr. Scott was saying, we sit there now, and now all of a sudden, we're looking at the backgrounds. At some point, I had to make a decision. We have to give people an opportunity. Again, when you look at credit, hell, if I didn't have this job, my credit probably be bad. You know, let's keep it real. And I think sometime, and I had to look at my recruiters, right? The recruiters were looking for people that were like them. And that was wrong. And I had to go and say, hey, either you're going to get the personnel that we're looking for as an agency, and change that. Even on the marijuana, and we're not there yet. I'm still working with my general counsel, trying to convince him. So young folks smoke marijuana, old folks smoke marijuana, right? So, but think about it, we can control that, right? Depending on how much usage you have. But if you have somebody say, I experimented, 2 months ago. But think about it, we get them in the academy, we can do random urine screenings, right? So those are the things we have to look at and give an opportunity. And one of the things that bother me the most, a lot of especially in the African-American communities, especially in a place where in 2015, before I changed out school resource officer, where we locked up 157, Angie, you were there, we locked up 157 kids for not sitting down in class, using profanity and being disruptive. And now you got somebody like that who want to be a police because as a child, did childish things. So that's why we have to definitely look at our standards. And again, we have to abide by DCJS, the Department of Criminal Justice Services, but those are things that we're trying to move forward with on that. And you think about it, just having that conversation, as Naya stated, that conversation and opportunity, communication, as they put it the stats, when we walked in there, you couldn't tell me that anybody would have anything to do with us during that first session. But 51% today say, wow, I would consider it. Why is that? Because of a conversation, airing out grievances, having an understanding we're no different than you. We're just alike. We have greater responsibilities. And then one thing that I learned in that conversation is, like she said, almost half of the people, they never had the negative interaction with a police officer. It was somebody they knew or something that they saw on social media. So those are the challenges that we have, and I think that we're going to get there eventually, but I would just encourage you all just to, and that's another thing. One thing that I noticed, and it's not about recruiting, it's about community policing. One of the things, I'm very animated. So look, I don't know about you all. One of the things when I first got to Richmond 2 years ago, I said, I want my officers at the community meeting. It does me no good, or my command staff, it benefits the troops. They're the ones that's out there, right? They're not going. So when we invited them, you know what they were doing? They were on the back walls, leaving. Oh.
Yeah, it's not a wall.
Witnesses. But they were just sit back on the wall, right? So I changed that. You know what I did? When you come to a community meeting that I'm at, you're going to sit in the audience next to somebody. What does that do? Opportunity. To have a conversation. Opportunity is the word, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
We may manage to actually bring the walls down here in this last session. Chief Hawkins, bring us home.
Oh, we got to stop? No.
No,
Because,
no.
what Chief Dunham, correct? Durham. Thank you. Sorry. What he first touched on is communication. That is so key in the aspect of everything we're talking about. I've been a part of the hiring process, whether it be recruiting or background investigation, since about probably 2007 when I was with Sandy Springs. And there was not a need. Sandy Springs was fully staffed as a fluent police department. We were picking the cream of the crop. We could say no to everything. And it was not a diverse department at all, and it's still not. I still love my Sandy Springs sisters and brothers, but they're not. Went to Clayton County. Clayton County has a need. It's very diverse, but there's also the issue of, let's say they're allocated 400 officers. They're short 50 officers short. So where do we get the recruiting? So as the recruiting happened, as we started talking to the recruits that came in for interviews, we said, why did you pick us and not someone else? Because that was one thing we started there that I brought here to where I am now at Fayetteville, is there's an interview with the chief with every candidate, indifferent to if the recommendation from the background recruiting is yay or nay. We want to see this person. We want to see what the file looks like in hiring. So we would ask them, why did you pick us, Clayton County? It was the recruiter. The recruiter made touch, made communication, made contact, made them feel like they were not a number. That made the difference and made them stay. So relationships building. I kind of learned that, and unfortunately, in life, that it makes a difference in how you build relationships, how people feel connected to you, where they want to stay, and where they want to work. Didn't make a difference in the pay. It makes a difference in the relationship building. So having the ability to look at someone, say, we want you, but actually the interview did two folds. You set the standard as a chief or as a deputy chief or hire the person at the top to say, let me show you what my ethics is going to be. Let me ask you what you're expected to do and what can you bring to the table. You do not have to be the sharpshooter, love guns, but what else can you bring? Every time I'm in contact with someone who is not in law enforcement, and this was in my city, I have a conversation because I want to know, what do you do? What do you like? Because I know in my police department, we do so much. You can plug a techie in our police department, and they will flourish. You can plug someone who loves children, and they will flourish. You can plug, the whole spectrum. We're people. So making sure everyone on the police department becomes a recruiter. Having that incentive. When I was in Atlanta, it was so long ago, they paid for a referral. Twofold. You got a first payment of get them in the door. A relationship. You have 100,000 people recruiting because all they want is that, as an employee, that incentive check. And then they get another check if they finish the academy. Boom, you have a recruiting. So that's an idea to bring. But being able to look at a file and say, what happened during this time period? What's going on with you? The other thing I found at Clayton County that I had to change was an exit interview of everyone, not just an employee, but even recruits. Because they would come and say, they did this, that, and the other. Well, I want to hear them on an exit interview. To have the exit interview and have someone crying, saying, I promise you, those questions weren't on the test. I promise you. Okay? I get it. Move on. Have a training come. Let me see the assessments of all the tests in the classroom. And to see a classroom where you would have 25 in the class and you have 23 fail and answer, that's an issue with the test. But the whole test, and you have 3 or 4 people saying that subject was not instructed. So they had to change how they taught. They had to realize we all learn in different ways. At everything from kinetics, learning, we had to teach on every aspect to make sure they learned. The success in graduation turned. So there was no more failures of academics. The process of shooting firearms, couldn't do it, they got exited out. Had to change the process of, okay, let's introduce, when they first step in the door, let's let them touch and feel what a gun looks like. Let's let them pull the trigger until they get to the time period where it's time to take the actual firearms exam. I had never taken a shot of gun when I went to the academy many, many years ago. I just happened to be an athlete and was like, okay, I get it. Still didn't even understand sight picture probably till 3 or 4 years on. But I got it. That was just me. But being able to train people how to do the skills to be an officer is easy. Being able to capture an individual who wants to have the heart of the community, that's hard. So getting that. The other ideas, where I am now, I am fully staffed at my agency. Knock on wood, like it. But here's the issue. My city of Fayetteville is one of the most diverse communities in the nation. We're close to Fort Bragg. We have a lot of different things. But my department is 30% minority, every minority. That 30%. That's an issue. The fire department is 3% minority. That's an issue. To the point where the city manager has established we got to figure out what's going on. We got to figure out how can we introduce different things. We're going to have a symposium regarding minority hiring, recruiting. Until we get to retention, we can't do recruiting and hiring. But that is, like you said, the idea is the plan for me. I'm going to grow who I want. I'm going to go into the community, give the opportunity to the high school to say, do you want a job? We got something you can do that is even, call it a cadet. I think New York has a cadet program. Call it a cadet. Train them on things that you need. You need resources in learning in community affairs unit. whether it be they're techies, let's put them creating some type of document. You get that attachment and you get that relationship building, and they're the first avenue to walk in the door of an academy class. That's the plan to build my agency. But that doesn't mean just the faces of my agency. My agency is very, very well involved in the community. They understand, they get it. Now it's just got to get the perception is just because it's less than 30% minority does not reflect the community, then why? Why can't we reach out to the community? What are the issues? Is it an educational aspect? Is it a don't feel I'm attached? Why would you not want to come? So I also have the advantage of having universities. That's the other connect. I'm going to be able to connect to the universities and offer, if not a cadet program or explorers program, some type of incentive, whether it be part-time work that you do your internship at the police department, and then you have another avenue to come on as an employee. So,
Thank you so much. We have time for questions. Please come up to a microphone on either side of the room. Don't be shy. If you could introduce yourself, your agency or your organization, and questions for all of the panelists or one panelist. All right, if you're that tired, you can just call it out, raise your hand, you can just, don't even have to go to the microphone. Anyone? So the question is, instead of telling people to find a way, did students offer specific suggestions for how to engage with youth?
Well, I think they were suggesting programs like our convening that we had, like the Inside Out program. Those were the things they were familiar with at Howard University. But in terms of outside of that, especially for the young people who are not in colleges, they did not suggest ways, but they felt like the colleges as universities, we should facilitate ways to bring police officials to the campus to spend some quality time with them.
can I comment to that? I think it's our responsibility as the law enforcement leaders to make a way, to make those connects with the university, to find community encounters with the leaders that are in community. We know them. And give our employees the ability to say, you help me figure out a way. You know your community, you know your neighborhood. Tell me, what do you want to do? What is their need in the neighborhood? Now tell me, what do you want to do in your neighborhood? I'm going to support it. What is it? Tell me the idea. What do you want to do? Whether it be, we've done things, barbershop, rap, whether it be a faith forum, community involvement. It's our responsibility to say, we know if we're working in our community, what are their needs? Let's go talk to the people who are not coming to us and ask them, what kind of other ways can we get involved to have this frank discussion, to get it out, peel back that Band-Aid. Tell me what the issues are. I can speak on some of them myself personally, but let them have that opportunity to share, and then that breaks down some walls and barriers. But I think we should make opportunities.
One thing in addendum that we heard from line officers is that they need opportunities created by executive staff to be more flexible with their work hours and arrangements. And I know that it's a challenge that the field is facing as a whole, but how to allow within a watch schedule someone to take time to participate in activities that wouldn't normally fall on their beat if they are interested and intrigued. That can only come from executive staff and unions. So a thing to consider if you're in a leadership position is how can you find time and resources or flexibility to allow officers who are keen on recruitment to participate in that, even if they're not ready to make the switch over entirely. Another question? Down front.
Dr. Scott, where would you like to go with this project? What do you see as the next step?
Okay.
A lot of good information. Where do you take it from here?
I would like to repeat this at some other universities and see whether and maybe even do is repeat it with some of the students we've had in this to see whether we get some of the same answers. But going beyond that, to help maybe invite them to design a recruitment program, help invite them to be a part of creating flyers, social media campaigns. I would like to see some relationships between the colleges and our local police departments where we could work with you to design these types of programs. And I was talking with one person yesterday at a session, and they were saying they were in a community where there were no black people, no black colleges around, and very few no colleges, so no college students. And he was asking about whether I could connect them with HBCUs And I said, well, we could look at that and connecting HBCUs to police departments in terms of them as a recruitment tool.
There's two things we know about millennials, too, one of which is that we will work for almost no money if we like the work. We've been told that regularly. Second is we're a lot cheaper than McKinsey. And third, I guess this is three, nobody's better at getting millennials to do things than other millennials. So maybe consider hiring millennials on your recruitment efforts instead of a consulting firm, because I promise it's cheaper and possibly more effective.
You know, I just want to add too. One of my observations when I first got there, you know, a lot of times, for my demographics, I'm about 37% African American, about 52 white population within the department. But when I was going out in communities, especially our challenge community, public housing communities, I would see my white officers standing, leaning on a car, while the African American officers, black officers, are engaging. And there's a uncomfortable level, right? A comfort level in dealing with, but I say uncomfortable level. Well, you got to take your officers and get them out of that uncomfortable zone. So one of the things is now we make sure that in any event, we're going to make sure those officers engage, and they have been doing that, you know, and just, again, that communication piece. And even at my management level, you know, Noble, how many of y'all know how Noble is? I mean, who know what Noble is? But see, there are some hands, even at the management senior level, who don't know what Noble, National Organization of Black Law Firm. I did a survey. I said, all right, every year we say, these are the conferences who want to go where, and they get to pick and choose. And I saw nothing but African Americans for Noble, right? And I says, why aren't you going? Well, I don't think that's for me. Why? Because it says Black Law Enforcement Executive. And I started sending them. And when they start coming back, they're sharing information. So again, you know, this race things, this bias thing, we have to pay attention to it. And it starts at our level, and it goes all the way down.
Any other questions? Sir.
I think North Carolina is unique because we have 7 historically black colleges and universities in the state. And what I'm seeing is some of the schools doing like Elizabeth City State is looking at sending their last year or their last semester, allowing the students to go through a basic law enforcement training academy.
Cool.
And as a private and contingency of their elective for graduation. So we've been heavily recruiting on those campuses and sending those recruiters to meet those directors, and we found that to be beneficial as a tool to recruiting. So at least with us, I think that's been a beneficial tool to reach out to some of those HBCUs and have direct contact with those program professors and directors.
Thank
And
you.
even your community colleges, because when I was with the Detroit Police Department, our academy was at Wayne County Community College. And so it became a great recruitment tool, and that we're right there on the campus.
Another question? We can take one more. The panel will also be around for a few minutes afterwards if you prefer to ask questions one-on-one. One more from the audience? Sir.
Well, communities, if they request that they come in civilian clothes, then I think you honor that request. But for college students, we felt that college students, when they see a uniform, they don't see a person beyond the uniform. This is just, whether it's black, Hispanic, white, woman, if that uniform, you're a cop. And I don't like cops. And so if you have to sit in the room with me over a 15-week period in that uniform, and we've been sitting here every day, like one of the police officers from Baltimore talked about her first day that she came to the class, and she said, "Good afternoon," and nobody said anything. So she thought they didn't hear her, and she said, "Good afternoon," and nobody said anything. And so when we were at the end of the class, when we were doing that last session, and they were talking about the transformation, this young lady from California says, "Yeah, I remember that day. You came in there thinking you were all that in your uniform, flouncing around in that uniform. I had to show you who you were." But then, at the end of the class, they're hugging, because now that woman has become a human to her and not just a woman walking around in a uniform. So that's what we think it is, that I can sit here and across the table from you and talk to you and not just see the uniform. I now see that you are a human being also. You know, in the class we did in New York, we had the police officer bring pictures of their family. And people was like, they were surprised that police officers had family members. Your baby looked like my baby. So I think this is part of what we're trying to do with that program.
There's a program in Seattle that's 8 weeks long where officers show up in civilian clothing for the first couple of weeks, and then at about a halfway point, they ask them to start coming in progressively in their uniform to acclimate the civilian participants to seeing people they've built a relationship with in their uniforms. We can't thank you all enough for your time, especially at the very last session of IACP. So thank you for your time and your contributions and your questions. Please feel free to reach out to either myself or Dr. Scott, and please feel free to come up and ask questions. This panel is excellent, and I have so enjoyed working with all of them.
And our emails are up there.
I want to stay in touch.